Prosecution Unit says it's now in possession of Mbalula's case docket related to his family holiday to Dubai in 2016. Last year, the NPA decided not to prosecute Mbalula on the matter due to lack of evidence to allegations of criminal activity regarding the payment for the trip. Barry Bateman is AfriForum's spokesperson.
They accepted Mbalula's version that the money that he got from Sedgars, which at the time was a technical supplier, it supplied clothes to Sascock, the money that he had got from them was a loan. On the aspect of accepting the loan, that is a form of gratification. We know this because we just got to look at what happened in court yesterday in the matter of Mr. Zizi Kodwa. And his version as well is that it was a loan. Yet the state is pursuing that matter. So with Mr. Mbalula, we've got this is selective prosecution.
And finally, water utility Rand Water says it will be embarking on an extensive maintenance plan of its infrastructure from the 22nd of this month to the 29th of July. Rand Water spokesperson Makeno Simaru says they've engaged with the municipal customers to ensure they have a 21-day period to plan.
As part of minimizing the impact of the maintenance, we have taken a decision to conduct a comprehensive maintenance project during the winter months to ensure that we are well prepared for the high demand period which comes with the dawn of summer. During the maintenance period, various customers will be impacted at various times. So City of Johannesburg, that is Johannesburg Water, Ekurhuleni, Mogale City, Mirafong, Rustenburg, Madibeng, Tshwane, Tembisile-Hani, Govenbegi, and Victor Kanye. They will be impacted during that period.
Recapping our top stories, some ANC members who are part of the #NotWithDA campaign in Gauteng have raised their objection to an ANC-DA coalition. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
Mama Kitty, I heard Rand Water talking on the radio about how dangerous it is for people to encroach on their pipeline servitude.
Yes, those high-pressure Rand Water pipelines are under the ground distributing megalitres of water. When people build on top of the pipeline, Rand Water is unable to conduct maintenance on the pipeline, which has a negative impact on water provision. Pipelines can burst without warning. People could get seriously injured or worse.
Yes, people can die from a bursting pipe. That is why people need to understand that Rand Water servitude is where a Rand Water pipeline is located. If we build our houses or businesses on a Rand Water servitude, then we are encroaching on that servitude. They say if communities want to know whether they've encroached over servitudes, they should look for the Rand Water beacons.
The beacons indicate the presence of Rand Water pipelines under the ground. They're rectangular, made of concrete, are painted either white or blue and have the Rand Water logo on them.
Let's take a walk around our area to see if there are any Rand Water beacons so that we can also tell the neighbors.
Rand Water, celebrating 120 years of existence and still finding new ways to provide clean, portable bulk water.
Are you blowing your paycheck on car insurance every month? Monica, 39 from Three Rivers, pays just 1,515 Rand a month for a 2018 BMW 320i.
None of the insurance companies has come near to the price I'm paying. I am happy at our insurance. I'm going nowhere.
SMS out to 30754 now for a quick quote that could save you hundreds every month. You'll also find out about included benefits like panic assistance and help it out 24-hour roadside assistance. Yusuf, 45 from Tegadal, pays just 700 Rand a month for his 2021 VW Polo.
Help it out. Took the family up to go and see the snow and I got stuck. The service was quick even though it was in a very remote area. Absolutely phenomenal service from our insurance.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
The battle between the Super Eagles and Bafana Bafana is an ongoing grudge that will never end. They both believe their style of football is superior. The West clashes with Southern Africa. This is the FIFA World Cup African qualifiers. Catch Africa's great football rivalry. Nigeria versus South Africa. On Friday, 7 June at 9 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. We love it here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on The Talking Point. Welcome to the second hour of the show. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be just reflecting on the latest report by the Public Protector, and it was focusing on gender-based violence and looking at the experience that victims have when they're opening cases at magistrates' courts across the country. And we know that the process of opening a case doesn't just involve the courts. It involves the police. It involves the social workers that sometimes have to play a role. But overall, the report finding that victims of gender-based violence are very poorly supported when they go through the process of actually taking the next step in trying to secure prosecutions in matters that involve them. So we're going to take a look at this a little bit later on in within this hour. For now, though, I'm just going to take a couple of your WhatsApp voice notes. Yeah, I'm sorry that we couldn't take more of your calls. I know so many of you keep calling in. Unfortunately, in this hour, we are going to change gears. So we will not be talking about matters of coalition government. We will be having something a conversation to that tune, even though it is a bit different in the final hour of the show. So we'll be able to take more of your views on that coming up later.
Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Hi, Cathy. This is KM. You know, people don't want DA, but their children are full there at the schools of the former models, where they are being taught by the white people. They are taught by the white people. Others have taken their children to the private schools. Why? Why you want your child to be taught by a white person, but you don't want the white person to be in government? Hi, man. This is really, it's contradiction. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Cathy. This is Linda Zwane from KZN. Cathy, today I just want to say a coalition between ANC and EFF is going to work. That's the only coalition in South Africa that's going to take this country forward. That's what I say. And I believe the guy that spoke to Stephen Grottas this morning was very, very wrong about the EFF being very corrupt and what. No, he's very, very wrong. But that coalition between ANC, EFF, and maybe another small party, it will work and take South Africa forward. Thank you.
Good morning, Cathy. This is Makatsi from Pretoria. You know, I'm hearing many people saying, is it ANC cadres or whatever, ANC members? Oh, these people. They're speaking of ANC so highly as if it saved us all. And it's messed up our lives since 1994. They may be in a better place, but we are destitute now because of the ANC. That's why right now we have DA and MK. If ANC had done its job and taken care of all of us equally and reduce all this unemployment and inequalities, we would not be here. They must stop saying things positively about ANC as if ANC is the Messiah. Those people are ruthless.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
Well, let me welcome onto the show this morning for our conversation looking at the report by the Public Protector Koleka Xalega, particularly looking at the challenges that are faced by gender-based violence victims in the criminal justice system. Let me welcome onto the show Advocate Brenda Madumise Pajibo, Director of WISE Collective. Advocate Brenda, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Madam Cathy, and thanks for having us.
Dr. Leslie Ann Foster is founder and managing director of Masimanyane Women's Rights International. Good morning, Dr. Leslie.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to all the viewers. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And Crispin Piri is the spokesperson for the Ministry of Justice. Crispin, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to our guests and listeners.
There's no question about the timeliness of a report of this nature. Concerns have long been raised about the experience of victims of gender-based violence within the criminal justice system. And often, people complain that it is a system that works and is seen as working against victims. And much of what was found in this report validates those concerns, says that, we have a justice system, a criminal justice system that is not fully equipped to actually deal with victims of gender-based violence. Advocate Brenda, let me give you the first opportunity just to weigh in on the findings of this report. All right, it looks like we've lost Brenda there. We'll try to get her up on a different line. Leslie Ann, let me perhaps give you then a chance to go here.
Thank you so much. Look, I think I've just glanced through the report, but the report substantiates our own findings on the ground. East London Court is in actual fact mentioned in the report, which we are grateful for. And I think across the country, what we are finding is that there is a failure in the due diligence principles and protocols that state institutions need to follow in order to respond to gender-based cases of gender-based violence. And there are pockets of excellence here and there across the country, but it is not sustained. It's not a sustained and systematic response across all courts. So there is a problem there. Definitely, we need to improve vastly on these issues. We see in courts that women go for support, and in courts where there are services from civil society organizations, you'll find a better kind of response. But I think that the real problem is across all of the departments, whether we're talking about SAPS, whether we're talking about the courts and DSD, who are the custodians of cases on GBV, there is what I almost think is a malaise, actually, where, malaise where people are not responding as they should. And there are a set of due diligence principles that have to be followed by these state institutions, and they are failing us. Now, my own organization made a case where we went to the United Nations, used the CEDAW committee, optional protocol to bring attention to this, and a very extensive report was given to the country after their examination, which showed where all those due diligence principles were failing and showed how we were failing women in terms of providing them with their human rights. These are all victims, survivors of gender-based violence. And nothing's been done. So we have the mechanisms in place, we have the instruments that we can use, but the response by people individually or collectively is very poor. And that's a big problem that we have to face in this country in redressing gender-based violence.
Crispin, I am quite curious about the fact that the Deputy Minister, John Jeffrey, is the one that had actually asked for this investigation to take place. But one would think that given his position in the department, that these are matters that the department should be well aware of, because the administration of the courts falls under the department.
Indeed, Cathy. So I think maybe just a bit of background why the Deputy Minister had asked the Public Protector to look at this was because of the reported media reports, I think a couple of years ago in 2020, of Ms. Kotia, who had approached the Belleville Magistrates Court to apply for a protection order. But then it was reported that she was turned away by officials. And that prompted us to really look at getting an independent assessment, because after having received a report from the officials, we then thought, well, to ensure that this is not a classic cover-up, what would an independent institution like the Public Protector found? And the Public Protector confirmed what the department's report was, that although Ms. Kotia was there and was indeed able to obtain forms for a protection order, she wasn't turned away, but she found the process too cumbersome, and as a result, didn't complete the process of obtaining a protection order. And on that finding, then the Public Protector decided on her own initiative to conduct a systemic investigation, looking at the roots of the challenges in the system. And that's how we then have this very comprehensive report. And yes, some of the challenges we are innately aware of, but I think it is a lot more comprehensive when you look at it holistically with the perspective of other departments and how they feed into the system as a whole.
My issue with that, Crispin, is that these are departments that are supposed to be working closely together anyway. How is it that the report on the state of Magistrates Court and the issue of not just the conditions of the buildings, but the administrative gaps, the issue with filing, etc., that those are then raised in this report by the Public Protector, but are these issues that the Justice Department is aware of? How long have you been aware of them for? Have you not been aware of them? So what I'm getting to, Crispin, is that what the Public Protector has found is really what are issues that the Justice Department should be concerning itself with. And
100%.
Yes, and so what is happening in the department now? Because we must assume that this is not the first you're being made aware of these issues.
Not only are we aware of them, but there are processes to deal with them. But the difference is that in some instances, there are dependencies that really lie on other departments, particularly from an infrastructural point of view with Public Works, and then from an ICT point of view with CETA. But these are matters that the Minister and his counterparts have been firmly addressing. For example, the fact that it's taken almost 10 years for the court in Garangua to be repaired and renovated is something that's on a priority list for both even OCJ and OCJ being the Office of the Chief Justice Department, as well as Public Works in our department, highlighting issues like shortage of water and electricity that's also at a local government level. So I think what this report brings to the fore is how other flaws in other departments just really impact the system as a whole. But I can reassure you that definitely these are things that the Minister of Justice and his counterparts have been engaging on to resolve, whether it's the Mamelodi court or whether it's a court in Vereeniging. And to some extent, in some instances, we are seeing fruits of these issues being addressed. So we've been able to open a new court in Durban, the New Point Court. In Polokwane as well, the court has been reopened after some renovation. So in some areas, there's been progress, but in other areas, it is taking longer than what we would really want to see, as well as with regards to for ICT issues. There's also an intervention there with CETA, which is going to start yielding results soon. But the pace of it is not an acceptable pace, and I think that's something I would definitely concede.
Advocate Brenda, I understand you're back on the line. Your own view of the findings of this Public Protector report and how these findings then need to find resonance in a department, particularly the Department of Justice in this instance.
So thank you, Cathy. ask yourself, why is it that the Deputy Minister had to raise these issues with the Public Protector? And Crispin has tried to give an explanation on why it has happened. So if we are living in a country that is tone deaf to the challenges that citizens face and issues of gender-based violence and how the justice system is organized in this country and how it has failed many victims and survivors, it tells you that we are in a crisis, because these issues that are raised in the Public Protector's report, whether structural or systematic, and I want to focus on systemic failures, because structural, they can tell us about public works not coming to the party. They can tell us about SITA taking long to procure an IT system. And it tells you that the system is not working if you are going to wait for a court to be built, or even to have an abolition facilities in a particular court, that it takes over 3 years to have that. There's a problem with that system, and that needs attention. And there has to be recognition that for people to concede today that it has taken long, and when victims and survivors and activists have been raising these issues over the last 10 years, it's damning, and it's an injustice, and it is contemptuous on the part of this government to continue to behave in the manner that it does. So when you look at the system, so you can build as many courts as you want, but if you don't have the competent people with the requisite skills to be able to mete out justice and serve the public in a manner that is befitting and that is more empathetic, we're going to have these kinds of problems where someone walks into a court to apply for a protection order. And I always say this, that I wish many of us can go to any court and see what happens in a domestic violence court, and how those who are coming to complain, how are they treated, right? Simple example at the Randburg court, and see how when you walk in and you are harmed and you are traumatized by your ordeal, and the people who are supposed to assist you treat you with contempt, then you realize that why that woman walked out of that Belleville Magistrate Court, because it is dehumanizing to go through that process. And until such time that we understand our role as officials, and why, when I'm a clerk of a court, how I should conduct myself when I'm serving citizens, will have another report from the Public Protector. So for me, is that you have these courts that some of them are going to get attention in terms of abolition facilities, being painted, having the IT system that require. But on top of that, it's about the quality and the competence, the skills of the people who are supposed to be in those courts and serving the citizens of this country.
We're going to continue the conversation in a moment. We're reflecting on the Public Protector's report that has found that our courts are not responding and are not supportive of victims of gender-based violence. The environment that they create for gender-based violence victims simply does not encourage the effective implementation or meting out of justice, because victims end up walking away rather than actually seeing some of their cases to completion as a result of the challenges that they face. It's 10:30, time for the latest news headlines.
Good morning. In the headlines, the Department of Health has appealed to the public to be vigilant following 2 more cases of mpox that have been recorded in KwaZulu-Natal. Some ANC members who are part of the #NotWithDA campaign in Gauteng are protesting against a possible ANC-DA coalition. And polls have opened in the Netherlands, the first country to vote in continent-wide elections for the European Parliament. I'll have details on these and other stories at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 18 rand 89 to the dollar, 24 rand 17 to the pound, and 20 rand 56 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mostly positive at the closing bell. The JSE is mainly higher in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are green across the board. Gold is trading at $2,365, platinum $992 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $78.86 a barrel.
Hi, I'm Khomotso KG Mweketi, and I believe in music's ability to connect, to heal, to remind, and to bring joy. And each week on my Saturday and Sunday show Seasons right here on SAFM, I endeavor to do just that. So join the movement of Seasons every Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's addictive. You might invite a friend. Seasons, only on SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide with me, KG Mweketi.
The Chill Zone with Bertha Charuma.
When do you know this is not good for me? This is not healthy at all.
One of the things that we often talk about is you've got to look at your ratio of good times versus bad times and look at the extent of which the bad times are. All relationships will have certain ups and downs, but you shouldn't be spending more time crying. You shouldn't be spending more time sad, unhappy because of the relationship than you do happy. People tend to focus too much on the good and ignore the bad, and that's the problem.
Linda Yende joining us, relationship coach.
Bertha Charuma, Fridays 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga.
Talk to us about the early signs, because for me, the issue lays in why did you feel guilty?
Exactly. It's almost normal and normative to... Food has no emotion connected to it. So guilt and shame and overwhelm and anxiety around food, those are big warning signs for us to really ask what is going on and why is this relationship with food tainted with emotions. I mean, we're happy when we eat or it's just a normal thing that happens in our life. It's not supposed to be guilt or emotions.
That was Marlene Vandenberg, who is with the Netcare's Akiso Montrose Manor.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana, weekdays 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on The Talking Point. I'm joined by Advocate Brenda Madumise Pajibo, Director of Wise Collective, Dr. Leslie Ann Foster, Founder and Managing Director of Masimanyane Women's Rights International, and we're also joined by Crispin Phiri, who's the spokesperson for the Ministry of Justice. Crispin, I want to give you an opportunity, right, just to perhaps state out clearly for us when we talk about actions that the department has taken to try and improve on the challenges, because you say these are challenges that you've been well aware of and not just new by way of this Public Protector report. In the 6th administration, let's talk about maybe 3 or even 5 key things that you as the department can point to, that you say you managed to achieve when it comes to alleviating the specific challenges that the Public Protector has made mention of in her report?
I think maybe let me focus on the structural challenges that Brenda has highlighted as an example of the interventions that we have made. So in some parts, we have completely built new courts and completed those. The Point Court in Durban is a case in point. Excuse the pun. And then the second issue is on infrastructure interventions with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. There is now a delegation in place in the Department of Justice that allows officials to spend at least anything that is below 100,000 rand for infrastructural issues, the departmental officials can directly go to the market for that. Whereas the previous model was any intervention required for infrastructural development or any issue that needs to be fixed in the department, you would have to go to public works specifically, and they would have to handle it. And that took an inordinate amount of time, as is evidenced with the number of costs that have been highlighted. Human resources capacity issues, that is something that we have looked at through ensuring that in the sexual offences course, we have specialized prosecutors dealing with gender-based violence. So that is something that also goes a long way. But also the rolling out of Tutuzela care centers, that's something that has heightened specifically in the 6th administration. So we moved from 55 Tutuzela care centers. Now we're sitting at about, I think it's 62 Tutuzela care centers across the country. So increasing the number of Tutuzela care centers is something that we've also sought to intervene. Because particularly of how the Tutuzela care centers are very victim-centric in their approach, and the number of ones that we've been rolling out now are highly victim-centric. But also insofar as dealing with human resources, installing proper leadership at the highest level to ensure that we have someone dedicated to these activities is something that we've looked into. So like I say, you could have been speaking to our new DDG for court services on this call. Unfortunately, it was held up somewhere. That's how I come into this call. And there is an undertaking, more importantly, to expedite some of these issues, as highlighted by the Public Protector, and show the Public Protector how we will be responding to these issues systemically within the period that she has given us. I think we have 210 days to produce a report that shows how we would be responding to these issues more systemically. But in the main, there are interventions that have been put in place. The ICT ones are proving to be a bit more complicated because it requires a lot more, CETA itself as well, to change some of its procurement processes to expedite the problems that we have.
So then, Crispin, to be clear, based on your response, a large part of what the department has done under the 6th administration was to focus on the structural issues and not so much the systemic issues.
Primarily because that's what the Public Protector highlights for us. I think it's definitely the structural issues. So ICT systems, the state of buildings, poor maintenance of infrastructure. Those are issues that we really have had to attend to with urgency and try to find ways to resolve them with other departments that have interdependencies with us. The systemic issues require the whole criminal justice system to look at. So we have to be looking at it right from the South African Police Services right up to even social development. And I think that requires it's a different type of conversation in a way.
Leslie, would you agree with that view? That, you know, that the systemic, the structural issues rather, are the ones that have contributed largely to this problem? Because if one thinks about it, when you are going to a court, what you are interacting with is not just a building. You are also interacting with humans in the building. And if a human feels disempowered to go through whatever process they need to go through so that their case or their matter can be registered or heard, does it matter whether the building has a roof or doesn't have a roof? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I think this is, some of it has been referenced already by Brenda, and I think Crispin as well. The problem is that we don't have a holistic approach. We are failing victims because we don't have both the political and social will to respond to domestic violence and gender-based violence cases holistically. The structural problems are important, and I want to mention here that the structural problem with SAPS, because we have to talk about that, it's not just the courts and it's the criminal justice system as a whole which is failing women. And with SAPS, we've said this several times already, that they are measured on crime reduction. And because they're measured on crime reduction, they do not report cases. They're reluctant to report cases that actually come to the court. So that structural problem is a very serious one, and SAPS is not wanting to address that at all as yet. And it's one which prevents women from getting those protection orders, which then leads to them suffering greater harm and also death in many cases. So we have to talk about that, and we're not speaking about it. I think overall, I want to say this, that we as a country are failing women because our prevention strategies are not going far and wide and deeply enough. Now, with prevention strategies, you talk about the training of all of the state actors on gender sensitization and making them aware of the harm that women suffer. So the prevention program also enforces and entrenches a culture of human rights, upholding the dignity and the respect, and of course, prevention of violence towards women. So we're talking about all of these issues, this part of the system doesn't work, that one is deficient and so forth. But unless we get a state-sponsored prevention program in place, we will continue to see the harm done to victims by all of the state actors. There are problems in the Eastern Cape where DSD hasn't opened some of its offices since COVID. That is a serious service delivery flaw that people are suffering. So even before they get to the courts, there are so many deficiencies in the system. And this is what is infuriating all of us, because we're pouring as a civil society sector our energies into trying to get all of the systems to work together, but they don't. So you only have pockets of excellence in places, and mainly the excellence comes when you have civil society organizations placed in those courts to provide the services that should be provided by the clerks of the court. It's just not happening. So we really need a comprehensive response. I think the public protector has honed in on aspects of the structural problems that are there and some of the systemic problems, but it goes much deeper, as you are alluding to, than just fixing, a cog here or seeing that the nut in this particular place works. And I think the amount of time it's taking shows that there's a lack of political will. That is what we need. And I think with the new government coming to place, a coalition government, we have many, many questions and concerns that we would need to place on the table, and Brenda has started to address those issues, but we really have to keep our eyes on the ball here. It's much more than is reflected in this report.
Brenda, I have to agree with Leslie and say that the finding of the public protector of a lack of coordination amongst these departments that are central to the overall experience and delivery of justice is absolutely true. But there is no will. And the reason why I say that is because people like yourselves were part of the group of women that protested, right? Brought the JSC to a standstill, demanding that matters of gender-based violence be taken seriously. There were all of these commitments made around coordinating efforts of government to fight gender-based violence. Much of it is in the NSP and all other sorts of frameworks. So the fact that 4 years after the fact, this is still a conversation that we are having. And it's about, how are these departments going to implement the recommendations of the public protector? It shows that there is really no political will. There's no will to do it.
Cathy, precisely. And I think that's why we've been pulling our hair for the last 10, 15 years as activists, demanding accountability, demanding ethical leadership around these issues, especially gender violence and femicide, because we understood the importance of ethical leadership, accountability, but coordination. Government has worked in silos for many years. We put together a framework of how we rid ourselves of that silo mentality, right? And that we have a coordinating mechanism. Only to just now, in a week before elections, the president assented to the bill that established the Council on Gender-Based Violence. That council's sole responsibilities is to coordinate the activities around and interventions around gender-based violence. This comes out of the 2018 protest on hashtag the total shutdown. And when we had the first summit where we made these demands. So you can see the length of time it has taken us to get to this point. And I think that's what we're talking about in this country, that there seems to be no urgency, right? And we play to the gallery all the time and instead of focusing on what is important. So when women of this country keep on telling you that this model that you have is not going to work, is not giving us the justice that we are looking for, and you take your approach is a tortoise approach in everything, and you hope that we will tire. It's not going to happen. And unfortunately for this new 7th administration, we don't have the luxury of allowing the platitudes and being told that we will. Where we are now, it's about action. And we understand that there is configuration of government that's supposed to happen. And in that configuration, our position is quite clear. You are going to center gender equality and gender equity in all of that. And it's substantive equality that we're talking about. So, Cathy, I think the frustration, we've passed the frustration where we are. We are action orientated and we trust. And I'm not saying hope anymore. We trust that the tone deafness that we have had for the longest of time with the previous administration, that is out of the window. That you have a very empathetic government that is coming in that fully appreciates what we have been talking about and why these documents that they have signed on. And in fact, I need to remind almost everyone, including Department of Justice, we were told that there's an IMC, Interministerial Committee on Gender-Based Violence that was supposed to coordinate these efforts. If you ask Crispin now, when last did that committee meet and how many times did it meet? I'm sure Crispin won't be able to tell you. But this is what we talk about when we say the political will is non-existent and non-existent, and we are not, and I want to emphasize, we are not going to accept that we given platitudes and you give us some sense of and it's a false sense of security that matters are being attended to. That is gone, and you will see what's coming up now, because we have put our minimum demands to this new administration that this administration must attend to, and central to all of it is gender equality and equity, and gender-based violence is going to be elevated.
All right. Crispin, do you want to respond to that before I bring in our listeners?
No, I have nothing to add to that. I think what Advocate Brenda is saying is absolutely spot on. We do need to have a heightened intervention in these issues, but also more responsive. And like I had said, I think where we can address the infrastructural issues, it should be done with great speed. And part of the infrastructural issues as well is just ensuring that the court, from a look and feel perspective, is victim-centric. So you don't want to be coming into a space that's hostile and is not victim-centric at all. For example, the report also highlights the same for the South African Police Services, that there are no proper consultation areas for gender-based violence crimes. Those are things that require infrastructural changes. They should happen rapidly. But from a systemic point of view, yes, certainly, we do need to be on the same page more frequently, along with the private sector and civil society in addressing these issues. And I think centering GBV is very central in how we address these issues across the board.
So you can't tell us when the IMC met last?
Oh, on that, I can't tell you because I don't have the information, but not because it hasn't met. It's something that's not in front of me as we speak.
John, you are calling us from the Eastern Cape. I understand that you are a practicing attorney and you've got some experiences you want to share.
I'm an advocate, actually.
Okay, Cathy. All right. So, sorry, counsel. Morning, counsel.
Yes, I have extensive experience and still current in high courts and lower courts, and the high courts are functioning well. The situation in the lower courts is desperate, and it's systemic. It's not. When there are structural problems, but they pale into insignificance. It's systemic, and I think I might even have copied a letter to you that I've addressed to the Legal Aid Board about this matter because I do a lot of work on legal aid instructions, and I hate to think of the amount of money that is being cost to the countrywide, because I think it's a countrywide problem with the lower courts, where courts in outlying areas, particularly regional courts, magistrates arriving at 11 o'clock in the morning, if you're lucky, and cases just being remanded and remanded and remanded time after time. So it goes beyond victims of gender-based violence. Everyone is being affected, victims of all crimes, and also the persons accused of crimes, because the system is a failure. Judge Mohleng, when he was appointed Chief Justice, he made a big play during the interviews that he was going to be focused on sorting out the problems of the lower court. Once he was appointed, it was the last we heard of it, and there's been no improvement. We've actually gone backwards.
Counsel, what would you say if you were to think about what is the low-hanging fruit? What are the things that the Justice Department can do today that would immediately bring a difference into the system? What would those be?
Well, to get courts starting on time and working efficiently, and getting all the relevant role players to be present when a matter is on the roll, that all of the relevant parties, witnesses, complainants, police, whoever is there, and that cases go ahead and that and are processed. There is such a logjam. I would love to know what that logjam is, backlog of cases. Because remember, particularly during COVID, but the problem goes before COVID, but during COVID, the magistrates' courts came to a standstill. And they've also been very badly affected by the power situation, where a court like in the Grahamstown Magistrates Court, regional court, big setup, does not have generators, so the courts don't function when there's no power, and that happens almost everywhere.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for
systemic, rather the systemic problems are where the focus needs to be.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for that contribution. As you heard there, John in the Eastern Cape, he says he is an attorney, he's an advocate rather, and deals with the lower courts quite often. Tulani, you're calling us from KZN. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Cathy. This is Tulani, TJ. Yes, TJ, but I just want to play this, that it is just unfortunate that South Africans have been so busy that they can't actually think as to what is it that is going on the grassroots level. The reason being is just because the situation or how the world has been planned, it has made them to be programmed in such a way that they can't actually think even from themselves. They can't actually make introspection. The reason being is that it is not the effectiveness of the court. It is not the political will which would solve the gender-based violence. This is in fact a declaration of the war. You see, my research has indicated that if the courts and whoever the political will or whatever is being applied effectively, this is a declaration of war. There are more women who are going to be killed unknowingly. So you are talking about the effectiveness and the political will, which will kill women, and they've been continually actually killing women. They still have got to go to the drawing board to find out as to what is it that's got to be done. Because these are just caterpillars. The SAPS have actually approached Ukezi, and then thereafter it has got to be sorted by SAPS courts and whatever. This is a self-triggered, gender-based violence is a self-triggered conduct, of which it has got to be analyzed as to why it has got to happen. And the way, if ever maybe these courts and the political will will be applied, I'm telling you, there will be more women who will be killed. Why? Because women use these effectiveness of the courts.
Because you say if the courts are working better, more women will be killed. Because why, Tulani?
This is an in fact, if we can actually check as to what is it that has happened after this.
Yes, but Thulani, I want you to tell me why you believe a better functioning of the courts is going to lead to higher rates of gender-based violence and not lower.
You see, a good fighter does not use the right hand. If maybe it has got to be a left hand which has got to be used. You see, these courts.
Thulani, I don't understand what you are saying. Speak to me in simple terms.
In simple terms, the effectiveness of the court is being used or will be used by women to make sure that they act the way how they act, and then thereafter.
By the way, this is to act the way they act because they deserve whatever violence is meted out against them, right? Because they are the ones that trigger the behavior, right? Is that your view? Yeah, well, I don't agree with that view. I think that view is nonsense, Thulani. I think it is absolute nonsense.
No.
All right. I'm going to Thulani, your line is bad, so at least we're going to have to leave it there with you. Let me bring in Leslie. Leslie, we haven't heard from you in a while. We're getting ready to round up the conversation. Let me give you a chance then just to give me your concluding remarks and perhaps what the next steps would be as we wait for the constitution of a new government.
Well, I firstly want to respond to what Thulani said. That is the kind of patriarchal views that we face in the country every single day. And it's those kind of views that we have to address both in the government departments, but also in our society as a whole. I think we need to deal very much with advancing gender equality and gender equity in our society so that the status of women is raised and they are not seen as objects that can be beaten up and disposed of. So in terms of what I said earlier on, we need a statewide prevention program that brings in this concept of respecting, protecting, and fulfilling the rights of all citizens, including women and girl children. And I think in our government departments, we still lack that. We have that very strong patriarchal view to women, which is why these systems don't work. And we have to address that at a structural and a systemic level, and both within our society and within our families and communities as a whole. Thank you, Cathy.
Brenda?
Sorry, I was muted. I think to echo Leslie Ann's point, by the time you get to the police and the courts, something has happened. So we need to focus the attention on prevention strategies and interventions. We can't hope that the law will resolve the problem for us if we do not do all of these things in tandem, right? So as you embark on a massive prevention intervention program, in whatever you design, you have to strengthen your administration of justice and make sure that the entire justice system is functioning, so that in the event that there's one person who has to approach the courts, then those courts are functioning effectively and efficiently. So we have to put our resources, we have to put our attention, we have to put everything in prevention, and put money into prevention interventions that are going to address the likes of Thulani, who are many in this country who hold that view that we ask for all of this as women.
All right. Let me thank you for your contributions, Crispin. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time. And you heard then there some of those reflections that have been shared. But it certainly does sound like we have a long way to go in getting the administration of justice right for victims of gender-based violence. It's 11 o'clock, time for the latest news.
In our top stories, 2 cases of monkeypox in KwaZulu-Natal and unhappy ANC members protest against possible ANC-DA deal. Good morning. The Department of Health has appealed to the public to be vigilant following 2 more cases of monkeypox that have been recorded in KwaZulu-Natal. The cases were confirmed by the National Institute for Communicable Diseases earlier this week. The Health Department spokesperson Cathy Mohlahlana says this brings the total number of confirmed cases in the country to 4. He says 3 were reported in KwaZulu-Natal and 1 in Gauteng.
The preliminary case finding report has revealed that the 2 recent cases had contact with the other previously confirmed case in the province, and this suggests there is a local transmission of this disease which could potentially lead to a larger outbreak in the province. The officials rely on transparency and cooperation from patients for contact tracing and case finding in order to determine the rate of transmission of this infectious virus at community level. The department would like to applaud patients whose honesty and courage during the investigation process assisted the officials to trace the suspected cases who also tested positive.
Some ANC members who are part of the #NotWithDA campaign in Gauteng have raised their objection to an ANC-DA coalition. The group is protesting where the ANC's National Executive Committee is holding a special meeting today at the Birchwood Hotel in Boksburg in Johannesburg. The NEC will discuss coalition options following the national elections where the party failed to secure a majority. ANC member Essetu Hasane says there's been a surge of media articles that seek to put pressure on the ANC by suggesting that the only coalition that would work is a DA coalition.
We are going to our ANC to say to our NEC leadership that we stand in solidarity with them, and we are saying whatever pressure that is out there, they must not listen to it, because the pressure that is currently out there seeks to create an impression that there's only one option and that South Africans want that option. We want to present another view that there are South Africans who don't want that option.
Police in KwaZulu-Natal have expressed concern over the number of cash-in-transit heists. This after a cash-in-transit heist in the early hours of this morning on the N2 near Queen Nandi Drive in Durban. Police spokesperson Robert Nechihunda says the robbers opened fire on a police officer who happened to drive behind the cash van. The police officer returned fire but managed to get away unharmed. Nechihunda says a manhunt is underway for the robbers who were heavily armed with AK-47 and R5 assault rifles.
All the time when they hit the vehicle, there's money in there. This vehicle was hit when it left from the depot this morning from New Germany. They were going to service ATMs. Suspects knew there was money. They knew the time of the truck. They knew the route. So we need to find out who's informing the criminals about the movements of these vehicles and how much money they have.
City Power has threatened to pull its services from Alexandra Township north of Johannesburg after one of its contractors was attacked by a group of people while he was on duty repairing a faulty cable that caused an outage in the area. It's alleged the group pelted stones, injuring one of the contractors and landing him in hospital. Other technicians managed to escape unharmed. City Power spokesperson Isaac Mangena says a case has been reported to the police.
Really strongly condemn these violent attacks on our contractors and technicians who are assigned to address the very same outage concerns that the residents are complaining about. It is deeply disappointing that our attempts to restore supply were met with such brute violence, and we emphasize that we will not hesitate to permanently withdraw our employees and contractors from the areas where their safety is compromised.
And finally, polls have opened in the Netherlands, the first country to vote in continent-wide elections for the European Parliament. Around 370 million people in 27 EU member states are eligible to cast their ballots in the coming days. The BBC's Anna Holligan reports.
The cost of living crisis is expected to have a significant impact at the ballot box. Resistance to green policies has ignited across Europe, driven by a perception that individual citizens, businesses and farmers are being asked to pay too high a price for the green transition. In many countries, including the Netherlands, radical right parties have sought to blame immigration for rising rents and a shortage of affordable homes. Many people are disillusioned with the way in which politicians have responded to these challenges. And for some, this voting marathon is an opportunity to express their frustration.
Recapping the top story, the Department of Health has appealed to the public to be vigilant following 2 more cases of monkeypox that have been recorded in KwaZulu-Natal. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays 9 a.m. till midday.
Morning, Sisiketi. People like Tulande, you wonder very much whether such people came out from the womb of a woman. I really don't. I'm so puzzled and so shocked. If you are incompatible with women and children, stay away from those people. Stay away. Tulana, yeah, you disappoint me. A team are talking like that about gender-based violence. My man, you let me down, man. You let me down. No. Let's hope there are no more Tulanis out there. No man. No man from Brixton.
Morning, Cathy. Protection order is a nonsense. People are dying with protection order. It's just an ornament. And again, people are confusing the justice system because they dropped the cases. I remember one girl was stabbed and was paralyzed, but she was sharing her grant with her boyfriend who made her to sit on a wheelchair. So it's really confusing. And the nurses must not turn away the rape victims and say they must go to the police, and the police also turn away. One of the victims died in Gqeberha. Thank you, Cathy.
Hello, Cathy. It's Kandi in Cape Town. Cathy, can you tell Crispin that in some of those rural courts here in the Western Cape, like for instance, Hermanus, people are still standing in long queues outside the court building, but inside the yard. They are exposed to all elements, be it rain, wind, or sun. So there's still a lot that has to be done by the department. You see, I'm hearing him saying all what he's saying, but there still is just a lot. People are queuing outside. They are frustrated, they're embarrassed, they are coming with all their issues, but they still have to wait for long hours outside. They must attend to this very agent.
Good morning, Cathy. It's DC here at Etegwini. I think it's unfortunate the findings of public protector that government is the number one pillar or custodian of the services of taking care of gender-based violence. However, I think we should also focus on the role of social groups or civil society. I think the best work that has been done, it has maybe come from the civil society group. And let's look, we are this civil society group focusing on, mainly the civil society group development. Which ones are dominating? Let's look at the black communities. Do we have enough there? And what is the reason we don't have enough? And where does the funding must come from? How do we develop the civil society group in assisting our government? Thank you.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
10 after 11 o'clock, welcome to the third and final hour of the Talking Point. Coming up in this hour, we are going to go back to the conversation, the political conversation that we have been having in the country, but perhaps just from a different lens. And we know that there have been multiple scenarios that have been cast for South Africa over the last couple of years, and much of it has also led to warnings about, well, what will happen if the trajectory that we're on is not changed? So if the status quo remains in place, what is the kind of future that we can anticipate, right? And unfortunately, it's been options of bad, worse, and, really worst case scenario. Does the prospect of a coalition government, does the prospect of a government of national unity, does it change that? What does this present moment mean for the scenarios that have been forecast? Xolelwa Kashe Katia is project lead at Indulamiti, South Africa. Xolelwa, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Cathy, and thanks for having me once again, and good morning to your listeners at home.
I'm still stunned. I wish you were in studio. Well, we've got the streaming, so if you're joining us online, you can see Xolelwa. She looks like a fresh of breath air. She tells me she's got 27-year-old twins. Kanya, can you believe it? 27-year-old twins. I don't know which fountain of youth she's drinking from, but she needs to share those secrets. Dr. Ismail Lagadin is a political economist and columnist. Dr. Ismail, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Morning, Cathy. I really would like to see Xolelwa, because that fountain of youth sends some stuff, love.
Trust me, well, whatever she is having, I will have it. 3 times a day. 3 times a day, yeah. I'll do that. So let's then turn our focus to this conversation. Firstly, before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, your own reflections on this moment that we are in as a country. What do you have to say about this moment? Xolelwa?
Thanks for that, Cathy. I think for us as South Africans, this moment is very important because it's a demonstration of how our democracy is maturing. There was this idea that the citizens have disengaged, but as you can see from the vote, the result of the election, that there is a bit of agency that citizens are recognizing within themselves, and they have utilized one of their most basic human rights, which is the vote, to actually make themselves heard. So I think the message is loud and clear, but what is encouraging also is that it's not a violent message that we would usually expect where we're out on the streets and burning things, but rather going to cast our votes to actually ensure that the state is listening and the political elite in particular is listening to the citizenry. Mm-hmm. So it is a very good moment for us.
Isma?
I agree with Xolelwa in so many ways. The one thing I would say, let me say 2 things, one of which might be controversial. The first is we're all waiting to exhale because it's been such an intense period building up to the election itself, and we're just holding our breath and waiting to exhale. That's the one point. The other point is, and this is the controversial point, it may be controversial, but I think for better or for worse, I think we have a chance 30 years later, 30 years too late, I think we have a chance to really make something of this freedom that we won in 1994. Because we were suddenly faced with a situation where, building up to the election, people lost faith in governance, people lost faith in government, but apparently we haven't lost faith in hope that we can create a better society. So, of course, there'll be people who say, no, we don't want this party in, we don't want that party in. But if we just think about it carefully, we really are at a point almost as important as 1994. We can make something better of what we've been doing for the last 30 years. So those are the two things I would say.
I really like how you have described it, waiting to exhale, because it does feel as if as a country, we have held our collective breath in anticipation of what happens. We know that it has to happen within this 14-day period. So by next week, Friday, we need to have the pressing questions of, well, how is a government going to be constituted? We need to have that question answered. Whatever the permutations that we might be working within, what are the scenarios for this country right now? Because coalition agreements and coalition governments in and of themselves doesn't necessarily confirm, and it doesn't necessarily mean a change or a shift from the status quo. And when I look at the work that an organization like Indlula Miti has done, it has been a push on, we need a change in policy. So if you have a coalition, same policies, it means same problems, same outcomes, nothing changes much for South Africa.
Well, that's certainly in one of the scenarios, because when we started this work, we were faced not only by the pandemic, which accentuated some of the challenges that we had, such as inequality. We felt that some of the storylines were starting to emerge sooner than we thought. For example, we had imagined a split in the previous scenarios of the ANC along Nasrec lines, where you see the NDZ camp and the CR17 camp splitting. And we think we've reached that moment now with the emergence of the MK. But now we had to refresh the scenarios because we have to cast our view towards the future. And there is one that speaks to things continuing as they are, where we have a centrist government which is a coalition government, because across all our scenarios we imagined different forms of coalitions. In the one, it's a continuation that just gets worse, and that's what we named the Hadida Nation. Noisy democracy, lots of bickering, blaming everything, blaming the foreigners, blaming the white people, the black people, the past, history, and so on. But nothing really changes by way of policy, because we're spending all our time bickering, while at the same time the rest of the world is passing us by. Even this global shift towards the East does not benefit South Africa, because we are so navel-gazing and fighting. So the divisions and the bickering becomes worse than they were in the past, and the noise, especially within Parliament, increases, just like the Hadidas.
The other scenarios that we can be mindful of in a moment like this, that can help perhaps even inform our thinking of what may be the best solution or the best coalition in this current moment.
The second scenario, we've named it the vulture culture, unfortunately. And now, just like the vultures, it would be a nation that is cannibalizing or vulturizing itself. But also we have global vultures who would come in to cannibalize, to help us cannibalize ourselves. So here we see a populist coalition that forms. And it forms as a result of the centrist coalition that doesn't really decide on anything. Things continue as before, but lots of noise. But then as we move towards 2029, from this moment to 2029, we see the emergence of nationalistic ideas, of tribal, like tribes, moving closer, closing rank, us going into these enclaves wherein we protect those that we deem to be of, who are similar or look like us. So what we see is these parties that fall out of that coalition form a mega coalition that is populist, that runs on the ideas of returning to traditional values and norms. But eventually what we see is that from the centrist government, including the ANC, there's a lot of defections where they join this populist movement that becomes very heavy-handed, authoritarian, and when it emerges, emerges on the ticket of dealing with crime, but at the same time it doesn't have capacity, and we see criminality across the nation where even international crime syndicates come to vulturize South Africa. The third one is a coalition that emerges as a result of the force of the people, wherein when people are even more upset than they are right now, because I think the sentiment was demonstrated through the vote. But if things continue, then we see the citizenry erupting and falling out into the streets, and artists fall in, young people, it becomes violent, but it pushes not only the state, but also business to start listening. Business starts investing in these social movements, and then another coalition then emerges on the ticket of listening to the people, but it also is guided by the spirit of collaboration, where it works with business, with labor, with everybody. So we're growing the nation together in that coalition.
So when we take a look at all of these scenarios holistically, does this moment mean that we have entered into either one of these three? And depending on where we start off, whether we start off with a centrist coalition, we are ultimately going to end up with a citizenry coalition. But what are the disclaimers attached to these formulations?
Well, what we've been paying attention to are the triggers, because in the Weaver one, which seems like the most desirable, even though it comes from hard times where the citizens are actually forced to fight back, so there is a bit of an eruption there, but it leads to cooperation where it's a citizen-led revolution. We call the Weaver Nation. It's us working together. So the trigger there, it would be reaching that moment, that tipping point where it's even worse than what triggered us now. Then, for example, I'd use the example of, no consequences really being seen. We're starting to see some consequences now in terms of, for example, those ones who appeared in front of the Zondo Commission. But it can get to a point where, say, whistleblowers are assassinated. So that kind of violence and lots of blood on the floor, then we see a citizenry that then gets so angry and it rises up, much like what happened in the 1980s. So there is that trigger there.
Ismail, you are a political economist. Of course, one of the things that you have to do is also study risk, look at scenarios. I wonder, number one, what you make of the Indlulamiti scenarios on the one hand, but on the other, I'm very keen to know sort of where your focus is in terms of some of the forecasting.
Well, Cathy and Xolelo, those scenarios, I love the headlines, the Hadida and the Vulture. I think they're really very apposite. And Cathy, I'm not very good at, nor am I very interested or keen on predictions and futurism and being prophetic and all that. But I will say, let me make I'm historically and I suppose intellectually very pessimistic normally, just because I think we have such a penchant. Humans have such a habit of self-destruction and if I can say this, I think one of our greatest fears as human beings, not South Africans, is our profound, and I include myself, our profound stupidity and ignorance. And so we're all so my view is always that we're on this path of self-destruction as a human beings. But let's put that aside. Let me comment on the coalitions first. First of all, I have a problem with coalitions made after elections for the simple reason that when coalitions are made or established or created before elections, people know what they're voting for. People know what they can almost guess at what they're going to get. When coalitions are made after elections, the political parties then become the center of their own attention. So you and I and Kalelwa, we have no say in what they're doing now. We had our say last week. We said, but we don't have a say in what coalitions and who gets into office now. So you end up then with a sort of so you end up with two things. There's the sharing of the spoils. The politicians then get together and say, okay, we've won this. How are we going to divide up power among us? And I or you might not be happy with the way power divided. And when they can't agree, they put up, placeholders, and they put up, I don't want to get away from the rhetoric, but puppets, or you get that kind of thing. So that's my one problem with coalitions that are made after elections. The other thing is, when we look at these coalitions and our route forward, it's very important for us to look at evidence and theory, because ideology, evidence, and the theory, and look at the evidence of, let's say, the coalition that runs Johannesburg. What is the evidence? What does the evidence tell us? And if we find that the evidence talks about, the evidence shows breakdown, lack of progressive move forward, investment in infrastructure, bringing in investors, then we need to reconsider the shape of coalitions and who is going to govern us going ahead. If we find that the people who are left behind in this process have given up hope, then we need to return to some kind of vision. We need to, and then confirm that, look, we know where we're going, we know how we're going to get there, but our problem is we've stopped trusting people. We've stopped trusting, and I don't want to single out anybody in particular, but we've stopped trusting the president, stopped trusting the finance minister, we've stopped trusting economics development minister, and that's the problem. So it's trust, it's uncertainty, and it's the fact that we don't have a say in the shape of these coalitions. And those are my immediate concerns. But I go back then to the point I tried to make right at the beginning, is we have actually a great opportunity now to decide whether we want to, let me try and, there's this binary, we have a choice between rupture and continuity. Do we break everything and start all over again, or do we just continue and look for stability, growth, etc.? Now, on the point of growth, as a radical political economist, I think the focus is necessary for growth, but it goes nowhere without the question of distribution, because you can grow as much as you like. If that growth doesn't reach people, if it's not inclusive, we're not going to get anywhere. So those are kind of my broad thoughts on where we are at the moment.
One of the things that this moment has sort of presented is South Africans really focused on the here and now. And when we listen to what political parties are saying, nobody is taking the long-term view. The Indula Miti scenarios are largely, based on a 2035 South Africa. What does South Africa look like in the next 10, 11 years? What does that lack of foresight, Ismail, do for current planning? Because if we're only focused on the next 5 years, there are things that we will miss about the rest of the world, where the world is moving to, that need to inform our present, that I think the nuances that simply won't be there.
Right. Kathy, that is a profound question, the question about where we want to be. I think we wrote the foreword to the National Development Plan is very profound in that sense. And you're absolutely right. We need to find out where we need to understand, we need to try and establish where we want to be in 10 years from now. Now, I just want to reflect on very briefly on one of the intellectual positions that I hold.
All right. And Ismail, Ismail, apologies. Before you do it, let me just cut you off there. We're edging towards 11:30 with the latest news headlines. We'll continue this conversation with Dr. Ismail Lagadin and Xolelwa Kahle-Katia, who is with Indula Miti. I'm going to try and see if we can also squeeze in one or two calls from our listeners who may want to share their own views on this conversation. It's time for your latest news headlines.
For the headlines, I am Dinomo Taung. Good morning. The Department of Health has appealed to the public to be vigilant following 2 more cases of monkeypox that have been recorded in KwaZulu-Natal. Staying in KwaZulu-Natal, police in the province have expressed concern over the number of cash-in-transit heists. This after a cash heist in the early hours of this morning on the N2 near Queen Nandi Drive in Durban. In Gauteng, City Power has threatened to pull its services from Alexandra Township north of Johannesburg after one of his contractors was attacked by a group of people while he was on duty repairing a faulty cable that caused an outage in the area. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Bafana, the AFCON 2023 bronze medalist takes on Zimbabwe Tuesday, the 11th of June 2024 at Free State Stadium at 6 p.m. Gates open at 3 p.m. and tickets are available for 50 Rand for adults and 20 Rand for children under 12. Scholars in uniform and students, student card required at Ticket Pro. Come dressed up to support Bafana to win prizes. If you're not in Mangaung, catch the game on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 at 6 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. For more details, visit safa.net and Bafana on X and TikTok.
SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
The DA offer, which I don't know if it's a formal offer, but the idea that the DA actually isn't in government, isn't in cabinet, but only controls the post of speaker and then the positions of chair of some of the committees in parliament. It's a deal. It's like when you buy a house and you offer exactly what the seller wants for it. It's a deal to close the deal. Do you think that's why it's so attractive? They've deliberately done this. They've tried to make it hard for the ANC to walk away from because they know there'll be consequences for the ANC.
Don't negotiate with a template. You listen to other people, you give and take. That's why you call it negotiations. You don't say, yes, my template, you fit in or you go out.
Okay. Dr. Matthews Pauser, of course, have played a very long role in the ANC and in our fight for liberation.
SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes, 6 to 9 a.m. The Market Update, Monday to Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m.
Want to stay ahead of the financial game? Join us tonight from 6 to 7 p.m. for an insightful journey through the day's market developments, financial updates, and investment news. Tune in for your daily dose of financial intelligence as we navigate the twists and turns of the financial landscape with expert insights. Only on the SAFM Market Update.
SAFM Market Update with Jimmy Muyaha. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on the talking point, and of course we are talking about the possible scenarios. South Africa 2035. What does this country look like in the context of these emerging coalitions? We're in conversation with Xolelwa Kashe Katia, who is project lead at Indulamiti South Africa Scenarios, and Dr. Ismail Lagadin, political economist and columnist. So Ismail, you were still answering the question of the long-term view, because coalition governments formed, especially over a period of 14 days, can very much be about the short term.
Right. I think the point I was trying to make is that we have to decide, and Toledo will probably will agree with this. We have some very smart people in South Africa. We have incredibly smart people in South Africa. But our vision has to start with whether, in the global context, is whether we want to continue to be rule takers in the world or rule makers. The point is this, and I tried to make this when I was at Nelson Mandela University, and also in, we can't wait for intellectual progress or new ideas to until they get to us. We can contribute to new ideas in the world. So we shouldn't let the world pass us by while we're sitting back and waiting for answers. Mm-hmm. We should be actively engaged in making decisions. And the decisions have to be about where we want to be in 10 years from now, where we want to be in 20 years from now. The way I try and put it to myself sometimes is just, It is not about whether when I talk about disabled access to buildings, it's not about me. It's not about actually that disabled person. It's about what type of country we want to live in. Do we want to live in a country that excludes some people? Do we want to live in a country that makes it difficult for some people to become the best they possibly can? So it has to be about what kind of country we want to live in and how we're going to distribute and how we're going to manage and how we're going to offer justice and extend justice and to other people. And that's where I think I would add.
Xolelwa?
I also like to agree with the doctor there, because one of the reasons why we started the Indulamiti scenarios is because we recognize that there is a lack of long-term planning in South Africa, and that is linked to the leadership crisis that we have. And it's not just within the state; it's across society, whether it's civil society or business and so on. And I mean, though, in terms of just my own interests, in terms of theorizing about nations that are traumatized and their inability to plan, much like how an individual would also struggle with planning, even if they do have plans to actually execute them, because we do have wonderful policies and wonderful plans, this constitution that everyone is always talking about, but how we then go about executing all those things that are contained within those policies, contained within our laws, because we do have wonderful laws. I mean, we've got freedom of expression, media freedom. In other countries, this does not exist. You would find that there'd be limitations in terms of the extent to which we can hold certain dialogues. But the issue of long-term planning is a problem. We tend to react to problems. Even with this coalition issue, we should have planned. I know that there are pockets, of political parties who have done some kind of scenario. I know FF Plus certainly had done some scenarios in terms of the likelihood of coalition governments. There's been the Moonshot Pact also, who also, proposes, a kind of a plan. So this could be our first experience of dealing with coalition governments, because it looks like this is something that we're going to be dealing with going forward. So maybe the lesson to take from this moment is then, how do you plan for future coalitions, so that by the time the electorate goes to vote, as it was said, that we know whom we're voting for? Because right now it's just a reaction and it will not be sustainable.
I guess the other reality is that South Africa doesn't have another 10, 15 years of testing out whether coalition governments work, whether are they able to get it right, because how the conversation is going to go is that no, this is just the first term. It'll be better the next time. And then the next time, no, we're almost getting the hang of it. But is it a situation we can afford?
We don't have the luxury of time, because we live in the most unequal nation in the world. So the poor, we can't be extending this, because these decisions about extending or not now, or we'll see about it later, as long as we fix this, these decisions are taken by the elite, whether the business elite or political elite or academic elite. The poor, are still suffering, and it's getting worse, especially after the pandemic. What we found is that those livelihoods that were impacted on by COVID-19 will continue to do so in the future. And then you combine that with the sluggish economy, but also all these security threats where we don't quite feel safe. So it's fertile ground for a rupture. And we should not act surprised when the poor rise up against the elite, because that is what then will happen if we continue along this trajectory.
All right. Is it Johnny, you are in Naledi. Good morning.
Morning. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Johnny. Your contribution?
Okay, I just wanted to talk about the coalition. I think the EFF and the ANC is going to be a disaster, because most people, I think, they didn't vote for the ANC and they didn't vote for the EFF. So I hear people saying they don't want ANC and DA coming together and stuff. But those people are working for the white people, and they are taking their kids to the white schools. So I don't know what's the problem here. And another thing, EFF is going to open borders and stuff, and come 2029, I promise you, DA will govern this country. Thank you.
Okay, Janine Naledi. Lani in Cape Town. Good morning, Lani.
Hello, Cathy. Thank you for welcoming me in the show. Just two aspects that I would like to address. First and foremost, one of the guests there, I think her name is Kolelwa, if I'm not mistaken, describing public political discourse as bickering. I don't think it's the best choice of words. Because this is the public, these are public representatives expressing the grievances of the country they believe in.
But Lani, when you look at part of what Parliament has descended into at times, would you not describe it as bickering?
No, I wouldn't. Look at the British Parliament and look how vociferous and intense the debate is. Look at Japan. They even punch each other in the face. It's not uncharacteristics of Parliament. We are not unique in this situation. Okay? Functional democracies have the very same kind of environment in their parliament. And another point that I'd like to address is, you were saying, you said something before the news regarding the history of the DA, that we need to familiarize ourselves with it. The DA is an alliance, democratic alliance, between the National Party, the initiators of the apartheid regime, administrators of it, and the Democratic Party, which are a tiny minority of English-speaking white liberals who were ashamed in the face of the world of how South Africa looked, really, during apartheid. So, yes, we can link the DA to apartheid. There's nothing wrong with that. It is exactly what it is. The nationalists are there, and it's most of them at the top. That's why black leaders, Mossi Maimane, Lindiwe, Kumzile Van Dam, they couldn't, because those are apartheid mentalities that are there. And your guest has just said that it looks like we are descending to populist agendas regarding the coalition and everything because people want to have people who look like them there. Yes, that has always been the defining feature of South African politics throughout time. So there is nothing new. In order to have a new country, we have to reverse and redress. We cannot, like we did in 1994, declare a rainbow nation and put a band-aid on a festering wound. Now it's become cancerous. These are the consequences of it. Okay. We have to regress and reverse. We can't just... Black people's pain has always been insignificant. And it's sad to see black intellectuals like her being so dismissive. It's really quite a shame,
Okay, all right. Lani, thanks for that contribution. Lani out in Cape Town. Maybe, Isma, let me begin with giving you an opportunity to respond before I close it off here in the studio.
I'd just like to respond to the last comment. Is the word bicker? This is just the words we use. Whether we use bicker, fight, argue, banter, it's irrelevant. The point is that there is bickering, there is banter, there is name calling, there's sloganeering, and all of that. But the other point is, and this is a very difficult thing to convince some people, because there's violence in the Turkish parliament or because there's violence in Taiwanese parliament, doesn't mean we have to be violent. That, two wrongs cannot make a right, and we cannot take our cues from violent conduct abroad and reproduce it just because they're doing it. Because they're doing it doesn't make it right. And so those are two quick things I want to make, knowing your time constraints.
All right. Thanks for that contribution. Kolelwa?
I think for me, maybe I should have emphasized the blame game in that bickering, because across all three scenarios there's a lot of noise, because South Africa is a noisy democracy. But in the Hadida one, it's more about blaming something. You're blaming the other and not taking accountability. Whereas in the Weaver, for example, the one where we cooperate, there's a lot of noise. The citizens are bickering with the state, but then something good emerges out of that. So for me, I think it's really a blame game where there's no outcome, whereas there can be also another form of engagement wherein there are results, where we find each other and we let go of our strong positions to find the ability to compromise and work with other people, who might not be those who look like us. Yeah.
And I guess the at the end of the day, it's about the fact that what happens in 2035 is largely going to be an outcome of choices that are made today. And everybody has to take responsibility for those choices. You and I make those choices when we go to the polls. Political parties make those choices on our behalf once we've voted them, into positions of power. And so our future is really in our hands, and we have to see ourselves as active contributors to that future. So the scenarios, really, please go onto the Ndlula Miti website, go and read up on the scenarios, and you make of that what you will. It's forecasting. It's a story of where we could go. And it's up to us to decide what we do with it. All right. On that note, that's where we wrap it up. Talking Point back with you again tomorrow as we wrap up the week. Thanks for tuning in and for all of your contributions.
Channel your inner adventurer on Top Travel this Saturday night at 8:30 on S3 as we're bathing in mud on an Eastern Cape safari. Blackwater tubing Storms River, free-falling over Plet, having the time of our lives, cooking with South Africa's trailblazing salt chefs, and searching for the world's only whale crier in Hermanus. That's Top Travel this Saturday night at 8:30, repeat Sunday at 1 p.m. on S3.
EFC is live this Thursday. Two of the most thrilling fighting talents to have emerged from the Mother City in recent years, Tamelo Manyamala and Terrence Bolelo, put everything on the line to face each other for the interim flyweight title, which guarantees a shot against the currently unavailable champion Nekazimulu Zulu later in the year. Also, Ayanda Zwane and Sibarashe Akonya fight for number one contendership. EFC 114 live this Thursday. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga.
Talk to us about the early signs, because for me, the issue lays in, why did you feel guilty?
Exactly. It's almost normal and normative food has no emotion connected to it. So guilt and shame and overwhelm and anxiety around food, those are big warning signs for us to really ask what is going on and why is this relationship with food tainted with emotions. I mean, we're happy when we eat, or it's just a normal thing that happens in our life. It's not supposed to be guilt or emotions.
That was Marlene Vandenberg, who is with Netcare's Akiso Montrose Manor.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents the first episode of The Door, an addict's journey, read by Samson Komalo.
The Door, an addict's journey by Abna Mariri. This book is dedicated to my wife in Tabiseng, who against all odds stuck by me far longer than I deserved. She's a true woman of God, an angel, and I owe her so much. Her strength and faith are inspirational. Thank you, my darling wife. You're the reason I'm still here to write this book. I also must dedicate this book to my beautiful children, Khotso, Naledi, and Kutso, who suffered so much because of me. I'm immensely proud of you and so grateful to have you in my life. Finally, I'd like to dedicate this book to the lives of those who fought alongside me in their own journeys to recovery. Some survived, some did not. Those who are still fighting, don't give up. Chapter 1. A Closed Door. Equality is the soul of liberty. There is in fact no liberty without it. Francis Wright. My parents were victims of forced removals from the community of Painville, just outside Springs. The town was growing and land had become scarce, so the only solution was for blacks to make way for white privilege. I was born and bred in the early 60s in the township of KwaThema, famously known as Last Dorp, Last Town, into a family of 7. I was the only child in my family born in KwaThema. During that time of history, political structures and all the voices of the masses were very strong and were in fact becoming even stronger. The regime of apartheid, a racially divisive system instituted to keep people apart, tried, albeit with difficulty, to silence the aspirations of the masses of black South Africa who were tired of being treated as second-class citizens. Arrests and disappearance of political activists were the order of the day. But the more oppressive the system became, the more defiant the masses were. People were relocated without warning to places they had never been before, and they had to accept it. You could ask nothing, and many families were herded like cattle to various settlements to give way to white privilege. The only thing many families had was the desire to survive. The conditions were tough, and the brutality meted against black people became even more violent. Even so, my recollection of the township was that it was a vibey community mixed with a bit of danger. Weekends especially seemed to offer up an incredible atmosphere. The communal spirit was something to behold. It seemed as though everybody knew each other. People were home chilling. Home didn't mean being inside, though. Home meant sitting on the pavement outside your house, communing with whoever passed by. Some Tsotsis playing dash to while away time, weddings, music blasting, people fighting, and even lovers strolling the length and breadth of the township. It was only at night that we all kept to ourselves. There were no lights, and only the hooligans roamed the streets, prowling for easy targets to rob in the darkness that descended after sunset. Like many kids, I had a curfew and had to be home at a certain time. My family